Wow, a new Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. video talking about the potential return of these characters. That is such an original idea, and that's never been done before, and that's crazy. That's a complete lie. If you are new to this channel, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. potentially returning is easily the most talked about topic I would say that I make videos on, mainly because, well, yeah, they do well, but also because I personally think that talking about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. returns as much as possible is the most vital way to show people at Marvel and show people who might be on YouTube and looking at Marvel topics that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has a very, very, very devoted fandom who really wants to see these characters return. So every time we get the sliverest and the tiniest of new information, I'm like, okay, time to make a video on that because people at Marvel need to know that we want to see these characters back. But Brad Winderbaum, who is the head of Marvel Television, recently did an interview with Agents of Fandom, which I'm guessing their website's named after Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., maybe, hopefully, possibly. But they pretty much asked him directly if Spider-Man the Animated Series or Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or shows like that would ever return in some way, shape, or form, the same way that Daredevil Born Again and X-Men 97 are picking up the pieces after Netflix's Daredevil and the 90s X-Men Animated Series, which, as I'm recording this video, that X-Men Animated Series actually comes out today. But it's a really good thing to ask because, like, yeah, X-Men 97 is a direct continuation for the X-Men Animated Series. Daredevil Born Again, for all intents and purposes, seems to be a direct continuation of the Daredevil TV show. So it's kind of the best time ever for questions like this to be asked because it's showing that they are open to bringing back old TV shows that originally, or they may have at one point not considered canon to Marvel's sacred timeline. But Brad's direct words were as follows. He said, "We're doing that right now. We're in production on Daredevil Born Again in New York. They're shooting as we speak. I'm seeing text messages come up from set. That's probably the next show that is going to kind of revisit and revive a really strong and one of my favorite pockets of our universe and our fandom. And you never know is the answer." So very much sidestepping, not saying no, not saying yes sort of thing, which, I mean, that's kind of a given with this sort of stuff. You can never expect these guys who are high up in Marvel to, like, say absolutely when you ask them, is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. coming back? You know, because that'll get people on both sides of the camp pretty annoyed. Like, there are people out there, unfortunately, who don't like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and think it should stay away from being tied to Marvel directly. And I think, you know, them coming out and saying, hell yeah, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. will be back this time next year is giving fuel to people like us who love talking about the show and love hyping up the show, and also giving fuel to people who might be against the show. So I get it, but also just there's nothing set in stone, and nothing will be set in stone for a while, I'd say. I think in terms of bringing back other pieces of Marvel TV, I think X-Men the Animated Series through X-Men 97 is going to be very indicative of what we see going forward for the Marvel animated shows. Like if they decide to revisit things like Spectacular Spider-Man, Ultimate Spider-Man, I don't know, the Guardians of the Galaxy animated show, the Wolverine, the X-Men, all these various Marvel animated shows from the past 30, 40 years, I think X-Men 97 is going to be indicative of what they're going to do with those shows going forward, and if we'll see things like that, and, you know, like Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes and stuff like that coming back as well, I think is likely if X-Men 97 does well. Very similar, I think Daredevil Born Again is going to be very much the case of if that does well, we will probably see the return of other parts of the Netflix stuff. Like we know Punisher is going to be in Daredevil Born Again. We know they're bringing back Karen and Foggy. There is potential for characters like Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and Iron Fist to show up in Daredevil Born Again, but I think it's probably likely they're going to save them for their own little shows or their own appearances somewhere else, and that if Daredevil Born Again does really well and it kind of sees a resurgence for the Marvel Netflix stuff, then they'll use that as a way to bring back Jessica Jones fully, or Luke Cage fully, or Iron Fist fully. And then if they do well, certainly we'll see maybe them branching out further into other parts of Marvel television. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. could be one of them. It's like, as well as that, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man coming out later on this year is going to have Nico from Runaways in it. I think maybe if there's a kind of a huge push for everybody liking Nico in that show, maybe they'll decide to bring back Runaways or some shape or form. I think it's going to be a lot of stepping stones. There's going to be a lot of, if it does well, there's no reason why they won't bring them back anymore. I feel like a lot of the egos that used to be there with Marvel, where they were very much, if this isn't done by Marvel Studios, we're just not going to address it, which that unfortunately seemed to be the case from like 2017 up until, I don't know, 2021, 2022. They very much seemed like they were just going to not address any TV show that they didn't specifically have a hand in creating, Agent Carter being one that Feige himself was involved with. But all the other shows kind of were very much off on their own for ages because they just did not want to have to deal with things that weren't under their banner specifically. So they're like, call it non-canon because we didn't help create it. And they continued this for a while, up until like No Way Home coming out. With Charlie Cox in that, it still felt like that wasn't the Daredevil, because they had the Marvel Timeline book came out that talked about the sacred timeline, and kind of in that book, the foreword by Kevin Feige talked about how anything that was not made by Marvel Studios themselves was not canon to the Sacred Timeline. And then they saw a huge backlash because of all the Daredevil Born Again original set leaks, and then that made them go, okay, you know what? Daredevil seasons 1 to 3 actually is canon, so is all the other Netflix stuff. And I feel like it's going to be the same with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I think we're at a point now where, thankfully, it feels much more positive than it did a few years ago. A few years ago, there were a lot of rumors like Daisy showing up in Secret Invasion and stuff like that. But it feels much more positive now, where it's kind of the case of it's less of an if and more of a when we see some of these characters return. Like, to say we're going to get an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. revival TV show, I think that's probably out of the question, at least for the next couple of years. I don't think we'll ever see like an Agents of S.W.O.R.D. or anything like that. I think the time for that unfortunately has passed, even though an idea like Agents of S.W.O.R.D. that is the same as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. but dealing with current MCU events would be so cool. It's like a no-brainer move. But anyway, the likely thing is we'll see Daisy show up somewhere, May show up somewhere, Coulson show up somewhere, and then depending on the hype for those characters when they appear in a show, that'll lead to something else somewhere. Because I definitely think Marvel are kind of digging into this whole thing now where they just want characters that people like. They just want things that they know have worked in the past. Marvel have been running into so many issues lately with their movie slates that I think at this point in time, they're going to bring back characters from things that might not necessarily have been Marvel Studios, just because they want people to be on board at Marvel again, and they want some good press. It's like Deadpool and Wolverine, for example. It felt like a time where we would never see Deadpool or Wolverine involved in anything to do with Marvel, especially not the Ryan Reynolds and the Hugh Jackman versions, and now they're coming back because it's just good press for Marvel. They're like, oh look, we're playing with others now, which for a while they weren't doing. They were very much like, no, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. So we'll see. It's definitely a kind of a non-answer where he's answering but he's not really. But I think it's positive that we're not at the point anymore where they're just saying, no, those shows aren't canon, or no, we don't deal with those shows. Because there was a time when a lot of these interviews would happen and people from Marvel would reply like, well, we don't really see Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or those characters as part of our little section or our corner of the MCU. Or they'd say something like, they're off in their own corner of the MCU and we're doing our own thing. But now they're straight up like, well, we're already doing that with other shows. It's not out of the question that we'll eventually do that with your show. So it's good. It's good. It's really exciting. I mean, I think we are reaching a point where it's like we're going on to 4 years in, I think, 2 months. Yeah, in May, I think it'll be 4 years since the final season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. started. So that's a crazy long time. And it kind of flew by that, like, since the show ended. It really does feel like it only ended yesterday. And I don't know. I think it's a good time to bring back these characters and start bringing them back. But I think they also do need to bring them back soon. Because Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a show that, as good as it is, you want to capitalize on these characters as soon as you can, because they're not always going to want to come back. Like, I can see some of the S.H.I.E.L.D. cast already kind of being a little bit apprehensive to coming back. But hey, we'll see. Really excited we got the tiniest new updates. Brad talking about this is really fun and really interesting. Hopefully, I'm really excited for Daredevil Born Again. I think Daredevil Born Again is going to be such a win for Marvel Television fans, and it's going to be such a cool thing to be able to see a lot of these characters again interacting with other characters in the MCU. So hopefully, Born Again comes out. We get some Jessica Jones representation, some Luke Cage representation, some Iron Fist representation, and that leads to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Cloak and Dagger and Runaways and all the things we love about Marvel Television. Maybe pipe dream, who knows? We'll see. But how are you feeling about this? Yeah, is this legit? And if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, and all of that. Trying to get pretty consistent with uploads lately, and the video's been doing pretty well. Kind of averaging about like 1K a video now, which is really good. I'm really happy with that. So if you're not subscribed or anything like that, please do so. And thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have an amazing day.